6 months after the shareholder vote, the airline formerly known as National had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. Rebranded as Skyline Airways, with a sleek new logo symbolizing limitless horizons, the company had emerged from its troubled past with renewed purpose and direction. Jasmine Washington, now executive chairperson, had assembled a diverse management team that reflected the passengers they served. The executive suite, once an exclusive enclave of white men, now included talented leaders of various backgrounds, genders, and perspectives, each selected for both their professional expertise and their commitment to inclusive excellence. Culture isn't changed through memos and mission statements, Jasmine often reminded her team. It's changed through consistent actions and accountability at every level. Those actions included innovative customer service protocols specifically designed to eliminate bias in passenger interactions. Flight attendants underwent comprehensive training focused on consistent treatment and cultural sensitivity. Supervisors were evaluated not just on operational metrics but on equity measures that tracked treatment of both employees and passengers. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some employees resisted the changes, clinging to outdated attitudes and practices. Others left voluntarily, uncomfortable with the new expectations. But most embraced the opportunity to be part of something groundbreaking in the industry. Former problem employees faced various consequences based on their specific actions and willingness to change. Maxwell Peterson, the supervisor who had forced Jasmine's seat change, was reassigned to baggage handling, a position that required him to experience the physical demands of airline operations while limiting his authority over passenger experiences. Flight attendant Brenda Stevens remained with the company but underwent extensive retraining and a 6-month probationary period during which her interactions with passengers were closely monitored. To her credit, she eventually became an advocate for the new approach, acknowledging that her previous behavior had been influenced by unconscious biases she was now working to overcome. Raymond Phillips, the passenger whose complaint had triggered Jasmine's removal, received a formal letter informing him that his status in the airline's loyalty program had been revoked and that he would no longer be eligible for premium services. The message was clear: discriminatory behavior would not be rewarded. Pilot Kevin Barrett faced perhaps the most significant adjustment. The new chief pilot at Skyline Airways was Dr. Maya Johnson, a former Air Force colonel with 20 years of flying experience who happened to be the first black female to lead flight operations at a major U.S. carrier. Kevin now reported directly to Maya, who held him to exacting standards of professionalism and inclusivity. Not all transitions were punitive. Kyle Thompson, the young flight attendant who had shown Jasmine kindness during her humiliating experience, was promoted to Director of Customer Experience, where his natural empathy and commitment to equal treatment made him invaluable in developing new service standards. Terrence Williams, the law professor who had witnessed Jasmine's discrimination, accepted an invitation to join Skyline's board of directors, where his legal expertise and perspective on civil rights issues helped guide corporate governance. The airline industry took notice as Skyline implemented a dramatic increase in minority hiring and promotion. Within a year, the company's workforce diversity metrics had improved by over 40%, with similar gains in management representation. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores rose across all demographic groups, indicating that the cultural changes were benefiting everyone. Skyline Airways quickly became an industry leader in diversity practices, with other airlines beginning to adopt similar approaches as they recognized both the moral imperative and business advantages. Industry publications that had initially questioned Jasmine's social engineering now featured Skyline as a case study in successful corporate transformation. 13 months after the takeover, Jasmine boarded the inaugural flight of the fully rebranded Skyline Airways. The Atlanta to San Francisco route, the same one where she had experienced discrimination, had been selected intentionally for the symbolic launch of the new era. As she settled into her first-class seat, Jasmine experienced a profound full-circle moment. The flight crew welcomed her aboard with the same professional courtesy extended to every passenger, not with the exaggerated deference often shown to VIPs nor with the suspicion she had faced previously. Captain Maya Johnson's voice came over the intercom: "Welcome aboard Skyline Airways Flight 1, where every passenger flies with dignity, respect, and the best service in the industry. During the flight, Jasmine reflected on the parallel journeys of personal and corporate transformation. The humiliation she had experienced had catalyzed not just a business acquisition but a reimagining of what air travel could be when built on principles of equity and inclusion. The financial results had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Skyline's customer satisfaction scores led the industry, bookings had increased 15% year-over-year, and the stock price had risen 42% since the rebranding, vindicating Jasmine's insistence that ethical business was also profitable business. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to review the final draft of her upcoming memoir, Higher Ground, Transforming Discrimination into Opportunity. Major publishers had engaged in a bidding war for the rights, recognizing that her story resonated far beyond the business world. The memoir would share not just the dramatic takeover but the deeper lessons about power, justice, and corporate responsibility that had emerged from the experience. Advance praise from business leaders, civil rights advocates, and cultural commentators suggested it would spark important conversations about the future of American business. Beyond Skyline Airways, Jasmine's actions had inspired industry-wide examination of how discrimination persisted in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Transportation regulators had launched initiatives to gather and publish diversity and inclusion metrics across airlines, creating transparency and accountability where little had existed before. Several major carriers had proactively revised their training and service protocols, recognizing that continued discrimination posed not just ethical concerns but serious business risks in an era where corporate behavior was increasingly scrutinized and shared on social media. As Jasmine sipped champagne and watched the sunrise at 30,000 feet, she thought about how far she, and the company, had come. The seat she occupied represented not just personal vindication but a fundamental shift in what was possible when determination met opportunity. The final chapter of her memoir ended with a reflection she had written during this very flight. Power isn't always about who has authority in a given moment. Sometimes, it's about who has the resilience to transform obstacles into opportunities. When they moved me to economy, they thought they were putting me in my place. They didn't realize they were showing me exactly where change needed to begin. Jasmine's journey teaches us that true power lies not in titles or positions, but in how we respond to injustice. When faced with discrimination, she chose strategic action over helpless acceptance. Instead of seeking personal compensation, she leveraged her resources to create systemic change that would benefit countless others facing similar treatment. This story reminds us that discrimination often persists because organizations calculate that settlements are cheaper than transformation. By acquiring the airline, Jasmine changed this equation, making inclusion a business imperative rather than a liability to manage. We also see that meaningful change requires more than policy updates, it demands accountability at every level. From the boardroom to the cabin crew, Jasmine created a culture where respect wasn't optional but fundamental to the company's identity and success. Perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrates that equity and profitability aren't opposing forces. By building an airline that genuinely welcomed every passenger, Skyline Airways achieved financial success that validated Jasmine's vision of ethical business as good business. The ultimate lesson? Sometimes when others try to put you in your place, they're showing you exactly where change needs to begin. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that needs addressing? Would you have handled Jasmine's situation differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story of transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up against discrimination. Thank you for joining us on this journey of justice, and remember, your response to discrimination today could change systems tomorrow. 2 hours into the flight from Chicago to Atlanta, the cabin lights dimmed for the in-flight movie. Jasmine declined the offered headphones, preferring to remain alert to her surroundings. From her strategically chosen seat, she maintained a clear view of both the main cabin and the forward galley where Stephanie Winters coordinated the beverage service. When the beverage cart reached Jasmine's row, she noticed immediately that Winters had skipped her, serving everyone else in the section first. Eventually, Winters returned with obvious reluctance. "Something to drink?" Winters asked, her tone notably cooler than it had been with other passengers. "Water, please," Jasmine replied pleasantly. "No ice." Winters handed her a plastic cup with water that was noticeably less full than those given to other passengers. The slight was intentional, a power play designed to establish dominance through minor, deniable discourtesies. Jasmine had seen this behavior before in subjects who harbored racial prejudice but needed to maintain a professional facade. "Thank you," Jasmine said with a smile that revealed nothing of her observations. As the movie played, Jasmine pretended to doze while keeping her senses attuned to the crew's movements. Through slitted eyes, she watched Winters and flight attendant Kyle Jenkins huddle in the galley, speaking in hushed tones. Their body language suggested secrecy, shoulders turned inward, heads bent close, eyes regularly scanning for observers. "3 special passengers on tomorrow's run," Winters whispered, just loud enough for Jasmine's enhanced hearing device to capture. "Atlanta to Dallas, then Dallas to Vegas." "Documentation?" Jenkins asked. "All arranged. Kim has the paperwork ready." "What about the customs issue from last month?" "Handled. We've got someone new in Miami now." The conversation shifted as another flight attendant approached, but Jasmine had heard enough to confirm her suspicions. The special passengers almost certainly referred to trafficking victims, and the network extended to customs officials. Halfway through the flight, Jasmine observed a young Asian woman, possibly Korean, being given specific instructions by Tara Wilson, the junior flight attendant. The young woman nodded repeatedly, her eyes downcast, her body language submissive. When Wilson walked away, the woman's shoulders sagged with what appeared to be relief or resignation. Jasmine waited for an opportune moment before making her move. When the young woman stood to use the lavatory, Jasmine timed her own movement to create a natural encounter in the narrow aisle. "Excuse me," Jasmine said softly as they both reached the lavatory queue. She deliberately dropped her phone, which slid toward the young woman's feet. As the woman bent to retrieve it, Jasmine noticed fresh bruising on her ankle above her shoe line. "Thank you," Jasmine said, accepting the phone back. Then, in a voice meant only for the young woman, she added, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman's eyes widened with a flash of hope quickly replaced by fear. She opened her mouth to respond when Stephanie Winters appeared beside them, her presence sudden and intrusive. "Is there a problem here?" Winters asked sharply. "No problem," Jasmine replied easily. "Just waiting for the lavatory." Winters positioned herself between Jasmine and the young woman. "I've received complaints about you bothering other passengers," she said to Jasmine, loud enough for nearby seats to hear. "That's not true," Jasmine responded, maintaining her cover as a business consultant while keeping her voice level. "I haven't spoken to anyone except to say, thank you. Return to your seat immediately, or I'll have to report this to the captain," Winters threatened, her authority as senior flight attendant creating a scene that drew attention from nearby passengers. Jasmine complied, knowing that maintaining her cover was crucial to the larger investigation. As she returned to her seat, she noticed the young woman being escorted to a different part of the aircraft by Tara Wilson. 20 minutes later, Jasmine observed Winters making a phone call from the crew phone. "Package delivery hitting a snag," Winters said cryptically. "Might need cleanup at arrival." "Yes. One possible interference." Jasmine knew interference referred to her. She had been made, not as FBI, but as someone noticing too much. When the plane encountered unexpected turbulence, the resulting chaos provided Jasmine with an opportunity. While flight attendants scrambled to secure loose items and comfort anxious passengers, Jasmine made her way to the rear galley on the pretext of feeling ill. In the momentary confusion, she managed to photograph crew documentation left temporarily unattended. One page contained what appeared to be a schedule with city pairs and numbers that didn't correspond to any normal flight operations data. Just as she completed the photographs, Winters appeared at the galley entrance. Their eyes met, and Jasmine saw something flash across the flight attendant's face, suspicion crystallizing into certainty. Winters had seen the camera in Jasmine's hand before she could conceal it. The plane began its descent into Atlanta, the tension between Jasmine and Winters now palpable. As passengers disembarked, Jasmine kept visual contact with the young Asian woman, following at a discreet distance through the terminal. The woman was met by a well-dressed man who gripped her elbow firmly. Too firmly for a friendly greeting. When she winced, he leaned close and whispered something that made her freeze momentarily before nodding in compliance. Jasmine photographed the interaction while appearing to take selfies with the airport in the background. As the pair walked away, she followed until she could hand off surveillance to her ground team waiting near baggage claim. Subject heading to parking garage level 3, Jasmine murmured into her watch. Asian female, approximately 22 years old, 5'4", black hair, blue dress. Male escort, Caucasian, 40s, gray suit, appears to be controlling her movements. "We've got them," came the response through her earpiece. Facial recognition running now. As Jasmine turned to leave, she caught sight of Stephanie Winters watching her from near a terminal shop, phone in hand. Their eyes locked briefly before Winters disappeared into the crowd. The first round of this dangerous game had been played. Jasmine had gathered valuable intelligence, but she'd also drawn attention to herself. The next flight would be even riskier. 3 days after her initial flight, Jasmine arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport for her second surveillance operation. According to intelligence, Atlanta to Dallas was a key route in the trafficking network's operations. Dressed in a different business outfit and with her hair styled differently to avoid immediate recognition, she proceeded to Gate B-23 for the midday flight. As she settled into the boarding area, a familiar face caught her eye, Stephanie Winters. The senior flight attendant was at the gate desk, speaking with the gate agent. According to the original crew schedule Jasmine had received in her briefing, Winters wasn't supposed to be working this flight. Her unexpected presence sent warning signals through Jasmine's mind. "Target has altered routine," Jasmine discreetly messaged her support team. Winters present at ATLDFW flight contrary to schedule. Possible surveillance detection route. Jasmine watched as Winters surveyed the waiting passengers. When the flight attendant's gaze swept over her, Jasmine pretended to be absorbed in her phone, but through her peripheral vision, she saw Winters stiffen slightly in recognition. Moments later, Winters was whispering to 2 other crew members, occasionally glancing in Jasmine's direction. Target alert. Implementing counter-surveillance measures, Jasmine messaged before switching her phone to airplane mode. When boarding began, Jasmine deliberately waited until her zone was almost completed before approaching the gate. Winters was not at the aircraft door this time, but Jasmine could feel eyes on her as she made her way down the jetway. Once aboard, she found her seat in the main cabin, 7C, an aisle seat that gave her good visibility of both the front and rear galleys. As passengers settled in, Jasmine noticed Winters emerge from the forward galley, speaking quietly to flight attendant Kyle Jenkins, who had also been on the Chicago flight. Their conversation ended abruptly when they noticed Jasmine, and Winters retreated to the front of the aircraft. 30 minutes after takeoff, the incident began. A male passenger 2 rows ahead of Jasmine stood up, visibly agitated. "My wallet," he announced loudly. "It's gone. I had it when I boarded." Flight attendant Jenkins approached immediately. "Sir, please stay calm. When did you last see it?" "Right before takeoff. I put it in my seat pocket after showing my ID at the gate." Jenkins looked appropriately concerned. "Let me get the senior flight attendant." Moments later, Winters appeared, the perfect image of professional concern. "Sir, could you have placed it elsewhere? Perhaps your carry-on?" The passenger checked his bag. "No, it's not here. Someone must have taken it while I was sleeping." Winters' voice carried clearly through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a security concern. A passenger's wallet has gone missing. Please check around your seats, and remain seated while we address this situation. Jasmine remained still, watching the scene unfold. This had all the hallmarks of a setup: the convenient timing, Winter's unexpected presence on the flight, the theatrical announcement. Her suspicions were confirmed when Jenkins searched the nearby area and then bent down near her row. "Ma'am, could you please move your feet?" Jenkins asked Jasmine. She complied, and he made a show of looking under the seats. Then, with poorly disguised triumph, he emerged holding a black leather wallet. "Is this it?" he asked the male passenger, who nodded vigorously. "That's it." "Where was it?" Jenkins looked directly at Jasmine. It was under the seat, partially hidden by this passenger's bag. All eyes turned to Jasmine. She maintained a composed expression, but internally, she recognized the trap closing around her. Winters approached, her expression a masterclass in barely contained accusation. "Ma'am, did you take this gentleman's wallet?" "No," Jasmine replied calmly. "I've been in my seat the entire flight." "The wallet was found under your seat," Winters persisted, her voice growing louder. "Several passengers saw you moving around suspiciously after takeoff." This was a blatant lie, but Jasmine noticed a few passengers nodding, likely responding to Winters' authoritative tone rather than any actual observation. "I haven't left my seat except to use the restroom once," Jasmine stated firmly. Winters' expression hardened. "Ma'am, theft is a serious offense on an aircraft." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I've noticed you on several flights recently, always watching the crew, always moving around the cabin." The accusation hung in the air, and Jasmine could feel the mood of nearby passengers shifting. What had begun as curiosity was transforming into suspicion. "I travel frequently for business," Jasmine explained, maintaining her cover. "I've never stolen anything in my life." "Then you won't mind if we check your bags?" Winters suggested, though it sounded more like a demand. Jasmine knew her rights. "Actually, I do mind. You have no authority to search my personal belongings without cause." Winters' expression shifted, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped to reveal something uglier beneath. "It's always the same with you people," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Rules don't apply, do they?" The racial undertone was unmistakable, and several passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others began recording the interaction on their phones. "I'm going to have to ask you what you mean by, you people," Jasmine responded evenly, fully aware of the recordings. Winters backpedaled slightly, realizing she'd overstepped. "I mean passengers who won't cooperate with security procedures." But the damage was done. Winters' bias had been momentarily exposed, and Jasmine had maintained her composure, gaining the sympathy of some onlookers. However, the situation was escalating beyond her control. Have you ever faced unfair accusations based on how you look? Comment number 1 if you've experienced racial profiling in public spaces, and number 2 if you believe people are too quick to jump to conclusions based on stereotypes. Hit that like button if you're as shocked as I am by how this flight attendant is behaving. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's situation? Stay quiet or stand up for yourself? And what do you think happens next when the captain gets involved? Subscribe now to find out how this tense situation escalates into something nobody on that plane could have imagined. The cabin intercom crackled to life, cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a security situation in the cabin, we will be returning to the gate in Atlanta. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for arrival." A collective groan rose from the passengers. Many shot accusatory glances at Jasmine, who maintained her composure despite the growing hostility around her. "This is completely unnecessary," Jasmine said to Winters, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You're disrupting an entire flight over a wallet that's already been found." "The wallet was found under your seat after being stolen," Winters replied sharply. "This is standard procedure for theft on an aircraft." It wasn't, and Jasmine knew it. For a found wallet with no proof of theft, the normal procedure would be to file a report upon landing at the destination. The decision to return to the gate was excessive and obviously targeted. As the aircraft taxied back to the terminal, Jasmine noticed something alarming through her window. Airport security vehicles with flashing lights were already positioned at the gate. This level of response had been arranged before the plane even left the airspace, further confirmation that this was a premeditated setup. Winters smirked at Jasmine. "Security will handle this from here." The aircraft door opened, and 4 airport security officers boarded, moving directly toward Jasmine's row with purposeful strides. Their hands rested on their belts near their tasers. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings and come with us," the lead officer stated firmly. "On what grounds?" Jasmine asked, knowing full well she needed to document this abuse of authority. "Theft and disruption of an aircraft. Stand up slowly and keep your hands where we can see them." Jasmine complied, maintaining the demeanor of an innocent business traveler caught in a nightmare. "This is ridiculous. I haven't stolen anything." As she gathered her carry-on bag, Jasmine noticed movement at the front of the aircraft. A young woman, one of 3 she'd been monitoring as potential trafficking victims, was being escorted off the plane through the forward door by Kyle Jenkins. In the commotion of Jasmine's removal, no one else seemed to notice this irregular procedure. "Wait," Jasmine said, trying to point toward the front of the plane. "There's something." "Hands where we can see them," an officer repeated sharply, grabbing her arm. The security team began forcibly escorting her toward the exit. Passengers recorded the scene on their phones, creating what would soon become viral content. Jasmine caught glimpses of faces, some concerned, others judgmental, many simply relieved the problem was being removed. As they reached the aircraft door, Jasmine tried one last tactic to alert her ground team. She reached for her phone to send an emergency signal, but one officer misinterpreted the movement. "She's reaching for something," he shouted, and immediately, 2 officers grabbed her arms while another wrestled the phone from her hand. In the struggle, Jasmine's jacket was pulled open, and her FBI badge, which she carried concealed but accessible, fell to the floor with a distinctive clatter. The moment from the hook had arrived. One security officer spotted the badge and froze. "Wait, is that?" Winters quickly intervened, physically placing herself between the officers and the badge. "I don't see any badge," she declared loudly. "This woman has been causing problems on multiple flights. She needs to be removed immediately." An officer picked up the badge, examining it with growing alarm. "This appears to be a federal law enforcement credential." "It's probably fake," Winters insisted. Part of her scheme. But the damage control came too late. The lead officer spoke into his radio, requesting verification while keeping a firm hold on Jasmine's arm. Through the windows, Jasmine could see the aircraft preparing for departure, with the trafficking victims still on board. She had to make a critical decision: reveal her identity fully and compromise months of investigation, or allow the plane to depart with the victims. Before she could decide, the captain received clearance for departure. The jetway pulled back, and the plane began taxiing away from the gate. Winters had accomplished her goal, removing Jasmine from the flight while the trafficking operation continued unimpeded. As the plane disappeared from view, the security team's radios crackled with confirmation. Credential verified. Special Agent Jasmine Powell, FBI. Release immediately. The officer's demeanor transformed instantly from aggressive to apologetic. They released their grip on Jasmine's arms, returned her phone and badge, and began stammering explanations. "Agent Powell, we had no idea. We were responding to a report of theft." The flight attendant insisted. Jasmine straightened her jacket, her expression hardening from confused passenger to federal agent. "I need to speak with your supervisor immediately, and I need access to a secure line to contact my team." As they escorted her to an airport security office, Jasmine watched Flight 1872 take off, carrying with it key trafficking suspects and potential victims. Months of careful investigation were now in jeopardy because of one flight attendant's prejudice and criminal connections. In the security office, airport officials fell over themselves apologizing. The chief of airport security personally offered his regrets, promising full cooperation with any investigation into the incident. "I need the passenger manifest for that flight, all security camera footage of the boarding area, and immediate notification to Dallas authorities to detain that aircraft upon landing," Jasmine instructed, her voice carrying the full weight of federal authority. But she knew it was likely too late. Winters and her accomplices would have contingency plans. The operation had been compromised, and the traffickers would adapt accordingly. As the officials scrambled to fulfill her requests, Jasmine checked her phone. Videos of her removal from the aircraft were already circulating on social media, branded with captions like, "Another black woman falsely accused," and "Racial profiling at 30,000 feet." What had begun as a covert investigation into human trafficking had now become a viral story about racial discrimination. And somewhere in the air between Atlanta and Dallas, 3 young women were being transported against their will, their fate now more uncertain than ever. Within an hour of the incident, Jasmine sat in a secured conference room at the FBI's Atlanta field office. Her backup team had assembled quickly, and the atmosphere was tense as they assessed the damage to the operation. Special Agent Derek Thompson, the Atlanta field office coordinator, paced the room while displaying social media metrics on a large screen. The video has over 2 million views already. Major news networks are picking it up. Black FBI agent racially profiled and removed from flight, is trending nationwide. Director Thomas Hayes joined via secure video link from Washington, his expression grave. "Agent Powell, are you all right?" "I'm fine, sir," Jasmine replied professionally, though the humiliation of being publicly removed from the aircraft still burned. "My primary concern is the 3 trafficking victims on that flight. We've alerted Dallas authorities, but without concrete evidence of trafficking, they can only do so much. Winters and her team will be extra cautious now." Jasmine nodded grimly. They knew exactly what they were doing. "The whole wallet theft scenario was orchestrated to remove me from the flight." "Which means you were getting close," Hayes noted. "They wouldn't have taken such a risk otherwise." The door opened, and FBI media liaison Sarah Washington entered with more updates. "It's getting worse. Airline executives are in crisis mode. They've issued a preliminary statement promising an investigation, but social media is calling for boycotts. The flight attendant hasn't been identified publicly yet, but it's just a matter of time." "And the trafficking victims?" Jasmine asked. "Dallas agents report the flight landed 20 minutes ago. They're reviewing security footage, but initial reports indicate 3 young women matching your descriptions were escorted through a staff-only exit. They never entered the main terminal." Jasmine slammed her hand on the table in frustration. "They're using crew access points to bypass security. We need to." "Before we proceed," Hayes interrupted, "we need to decide how to handle the public relations aspect. This video has created a situation we might be able to use." All eyes turned to the director. "How so, sir?" Jasmine asked. "The trafficking network now knows you were investigating them, but they don't necessarily know we've identified their entire operation. They think they've successfully neutralized you as a threat." Jasmine began to understand where Hayes was heading. "So we let them think they've won." "Exactly," Hayes confirmed. "We use the viral video as cover. Let them believe this is now solely about racial profiling on airlines. Meanwhile, we intensify our investigation behind the scenes." Agent Thompson pulled up airline employment records on his tablet. "We've been digging into Stephanie Winters' background. There's something interesting here. She has numerous passenger complaints in her file, dating back several years. Disproportionately from minority passengers." "Let me guess," Jasmine said. "Those complaints were buried." "Precisely. Never resulted in any disciplinary action. Someone in the airline's HR department has been protecting her." Sarah Washington added, "We've also uncovered something else. 3 airline executives were flagged in our initial investigation for possible connections to the trafficking network." Jasmine connected the dots. So Winters has protection from above. That explains her confidence in setting me up so blatantly. The conference room door opened again, and a tech analyst entered with a flash drive. "Agent Powell, we've been analyzing your surveillance data from the first flight. The audio you captured of Winters' phone conversation has given us something." The analyst played the enhanced recording, and the team listened intently as Winters discussed package delivery problems and interference. "There's more," the analyst continued. "We traced financial transactions linked to Winters. She's received wire transfers from offshore accounts totaling over $120,000 in the past 6 months. This was the breakthrough they needed. The evidence was mounting, but they still lacked enough to bring down the entire network." A knock at the door revealed 2 anxious airline executives who had just arrived from corporate headquarters. Hayes welcomed them into the meeting with a calculating smile. "Gentlemen, I believe we have mutual interests to discuss." The executives looked nervously at the assembled FBI agents, then at the social media feeds displayed on the screens showing their airline's plummeting stock price in real time. "The Bureau is investigating a serious matter involving one of your employees," Hayes began. "But first, let's discuss the incident that's currently going viral." One executive, identifying himself as the airline's chief operating officer, stepped forward. "We want to extend our deepest apologies to Agent Powell. This incident does not reflect our company values, and we're prepared to issue a public apology and appropriate compensation." "That's a start," Hayes replied coolly, "but insufficient. We have evidence suggesting your employee Stephanie Winters has been involved in human trafficking operations utilizing your airline's routes and personnel." The executives blanched. "Furthermore," Hayes continued, "we have reason to believe others within your organization may be complicit." Jasmine watched the executives carefully, noting which one showed fear rather than surprise. The chief operating officer maintained his composure, but the vice president of operations couldn't hide his anxiety. She made a mental note to investigate him more thoroughly. "What can we do?" the COO asked, visibly shaken. Hayes deferred to Jasmine, acknowledging her lead role in the investigation. Jasmine stood, commanding the room's attention. "I have a proposal that serves both our interests." She outlined her plan, a strategy that would use the viral incident as a smokescreen while advancing the trafficking investigation. The airline would publicly apologize and suspend Winters, creating a false sense of security for the trafficking network. Meanwhile, the FBI would access all of Winters' flight records, crew connections, and communications. "You want to use the racial profiling incident as cover," the COO summarized. "Exactly," Jasmine confirmed. "The traffickers will believe their plan worked, that this is now about discrimination rather than their criminal enterprise. It gives us room to maneuver." The executives exchanged glances, recognizing that cooperation was their only viable option. With the potential PR disaster already unfolding and the possibility of criminal liability if they impeded a federal investigation, they quickly agreed to Jasmine's terms. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine found herself alone with Director Hayes. "This is personal for you now," Hayes observed. "Not just the case, but how they used racial prejudice as a weapon against you." Jasmine considered this. "They picked the wrong weapon and the wrong target. We'll use their prejudice against them." Hayes nodded approvingly. "We've identified 3 more potential victims scheduled for transport in the next 48 hours. Based on intercepted communications, the network is planning what they call expedited deliveries before shutting down certain routes. They're rushing to complete transactions before changing their patterns," Jasmine concluded. "That makes them vulnerable." "Exactly. Which is why I'm approving your request for a deep cover operation. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to catch them in the act." Jasmine felt a surge of determination. The traffickers had exposed themselves by targeting her. Now she would use their mistake to dismantle their entire operation. "What about Winters?" she asked. "Won't she recognize me if I go undercover?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Not after our technical team is finished. By the time we're done, your own mother wouldn't recognize you." As they finalized the details of the operation, Jasmine knew they were entering the most dangerous phase yet. The traffickers had shown they were willing to use any means necessary to protect their operation. But they hadn't counted on one crucial factor: they had transformed a professional investigation into a personal mission for justice. 48 hours after the flight incident, Jasmine sat across from a CNN anchor in the network's Atlanta studio. Her appearance had been carefully orchestrated as part of the FBI's counterattack strategy, using the viral video as a tactical advantage. "Agent Powell, thank you for joining us," the anchor began. "The video of your removal from that flight has been viewed over 20 million times. Can you tell us what happened?" Jasmine, dressed in a conservative suit with her FBI credentials visible, projected calm authority. "I was profiled and falsely accused of theft by a flight attendant who made assumptions based on my appearance. Unfortunately, this kind of treatment is something many Black Americans experience daily. The airline has issued an apology and suspended the flight attendant in question. Is that sufficient in your view?" "It's a start," Jasmine replied diplomatically. "But this incident highlights systemic issues that require deeper changes. I hope my experience leads to improved training and accountability across the airline industry." What Jasmine couldn't mention, was that this interview was merely cover for the real operation unfolding behind the scenes. As she spoke about racial profiling, FBI teams were executing search warrants on Stephanie Winters' residence and accessing her digital footprint through cooperation with the airline's IT department. After completing the interview, Jasmine was whisked to a secure location where her transformation began. For the next phase of the operation, she would need to be unrecognizable not only to Winters but to anyone who had seen the viral video. The FBI's technical team worked methodically, altering her appearance with professional-grade techniques. Her natural hair was concealed under a custom wig. Subtle facial prosthetics changed the contours of her cheekbones and jawline. Colored contacts transformed her brown eyes to hazel. When they finished, Jasmine studied her reflection. The person staring back could pass for her distant cousin, but never her identical twin. "Perfect," she murmured, testing different facial expressions to ensure the prosthetics moved naturally. Meanwhile, the investigation had accelerated dramatically. At FBI headquarters, analysts had been working around the clock, reviewing all of Stephanie Winters' flight records and identifying patterns. "We found something significant," Agent Thompson reported during the pre-operation briefing. Winters worked specific routes repeatedly, even swapping shifts to ensure she was on these flights. Atlanta to Dallas, Dallas to Las Vegas, Chicago to Miami, and Miami to various Caribbean destinations. All major trafficking corridors, Jasmine noted. "Exactly. And look at this passenger data." Thompson displayed a series of flight manifests. "We've identified 23 young women who boarded these flights but have no record of continuing travel or returning home. They effectively disappeared after landing." The scope of the operation was becoming clearer, and more disturbing. This wasn't just about moving victims, it was an elaborate system designed to make them vanish from official records. Further investigation into Winters' finances revealed the trafficking operation's sophistication. The offshore accounts connected to her had been traced to shell companies in countries with weak financial regulations. These companies, in turn, were linked to luxury resorts in the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, likely fronts for sex trafficking operations. "We've also made a breakthrough with the airline staff," Thompson continued. "After the public relations disaster of your removal, several employees have come forward with information they were previously afraid to share. One flight attendant had reported overhearing Winters discussing new merchandise with Kyle Jenkins. Another had noticed young women being escorted through employee-only areas at various airports. A ground crew member had witnessed suspicious interactions between Winters and customs officials who appeared to be facilitating expedited passage for certain passengers. The puzzle pieces were coming together, revealing a network that extended far beyond Stephanie Winters. The flight attendant was merely one cog in a machine that involved airline personnel, airport security, customs officials, and powerful clients willing to pay premium prices for trafficked women. But the most alarming discovery came from surveillance of Winters following her suspension. Despite the public scrutiny, she had met with unknown contacts at an airport hotel. FBI agents photographed the meeting discreetly, identifying 3 of the participants as individuals with suspected ties to international organized crime. "They're nervous but not shutting down," Jasmine observed, studying the surveillance photos. "They're too invested, too confident in their protection. Which gives us our opportunity," Director Hayes noted. According to intercepted communications, they're recruiting new flight attendants to replace Winters while she's suspended. They need someone who can access secure areas of the airports. This was where Jasmine's undercover role would begin. Using her transformed appearance and a carefully constructed identity as a disgruntled airline employee seeking extra income, she would infiltrate the recruitment meeting scheduled for the following evening. The operation carried extraordinary risks. If recognized, Jasmine would have no immediate backup in a room full of traffickers. But the potential reward, dismantling an international trafficking network and rescuing dozens of victims, justified the danger. As final preparations were made, Jasmine received a secure call from an unexpected source. "Agent Powell. This is Jennifer Davis from Victim Services. One of the young women from your initial surveillance has been found." Jasmine's heart raced. "Is she safe?" "Yes. Dallas police discovered her trying to escape from a hotel near the airport. She's traumatized but talking. She's confirmed much of what we suspected about the operation and provided names we didn't have before." This was the human reminder of what was at stake, not just an investigation, but lives. Real women with families, dreams, and futures that had been stolen from them. The morning before the undercover operation, Jasmine visited the rescued victim in a safe house secured by the FBI. The young woman, barely 20 years old, had been lured with promises of modeling work, only to have her passport confiscated and to be told she now owed tens of thousands of dollars for transportation and placement fees. "They said if I went to the police, they would hurt my family," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. The flight attendant, the blonde one, she was always the scariest. "She enjoyed it, I think." Jasmine gently asked questions about the operation's logistics, gathering final details that might help with the undercover mission. When she finished, she promised the young woman that those responsible would face justice. That evening, Jasmine, now operating under the cover identity of Tasha Williams, a furloughed airline employee desperate for money, prepared to enter the hotel conference room where the trafficking network was recruiting new accomplices. She wore sophisticated surveillance equipment designed by the FBI's technical division, a necklace with a hidden camera, earrings containing audio transmitters, and a watch that could send emergency signals to the tactical team stationed nearby. "Testing, testing," she murmured, activating the equipment. "Receiving you clearly," came the response in her nearly invisible earpiece. "Tactical teams are in position. Remember, your extraction signal is touching your left earring twice. Use it at the first sign of trouble." Jasmine took a deep breath, centering herself for what lay ahead. In her years with the FBI, she had conducted numerous undercover operations, but none with such personal significance. The trafficking network had used racial prejudice as a weapon against her. Now she would use their own biases and assumptions to infiltrate their operation. With a final equipment check, Jasmine stepped out of the surveillance van and walked toward the hotel entrance, her posture and gait transformed to match her new identity. Inside, a network of criminals awaited, unaware that they had invited a federal agent into their midst. The Meridian Hotel's Valencia room buzzed with low conversation as Jasmine, now fully embodying her cover identity as Tasha Williams, approached the registration table. A woman with a clipboard checked her name against a list. "Tasha Williams? You were referred by Kyle Jenkins," Jasmine replied confidently, using the name of Winter's known associate. The FBI had intercepted communications indicating Jenkins was helping recruit replacements during Winter's suspension. Right. Take a seat inside. Presentation starts in 10 minutes. The conference room was arranged with rows of chairs facing a small stage. About 20 people, mostly women in their 20s and 30s, sat scattered throughout the space. From their attire and demeanor, Jasmine pegged them as airline employees or those with airport experience. Perfect cover for a trafficking operation. She chose a seat with good sightlines to both exits and the podium, conducting a subtle scan of the room. Two men in dark suits stood by the doors, security, undoubtedly armed. Near the podium, a woman with a tablet checked something repeatedly, her nervous energy palpable even from a distance. Jasmine's pulse quickened when she spotted familiar faces from her surveillance photos, Kyle Jenkins and Tara Wilson, both flight attendants connected to Winters. Then, surprisingly, Stephanie Winters herself entered from a side door. "She's here," Jasmine subvocalized, knowing her surveillance team would hear through her concealed microphone. "Winters is on site despite her suspension." "Acknowledged," came the barely audible response in her earpiece. "Maintain cover. Surveillance active." At precisely 7 o'clock, a well-dressed man in his 50s took the stage. He didn't introduce himself, a telling sign in an organization valuing anonymity. "Thank you all for coming. You're here because someone trusted vouched for your discretion and ambition." His voice carried the polished tone of wealth and education. "What we offer is simple, significant supplemental income for minimal extra work during your regular duties." The presentation that followed was masterfully vague while conveying the essential information. The man spoke of facilitating special client experiences and ensuring smooth transit for priority customers. Never once did he explicitly mention anything illegal, yet the implication was clear to anyone paying attention: they were being recruited to assist in moving people discreetly through airports, bypassing normal security protocols. Selected candidates can earn between $5,000 and $10,000 monthly, depending on routes and frequency, the man continued. Payment is made through offshore accounts, completely untraceable to your regular income. During the presentation, Jasmine noted Winters studying the attendees carefully. She kept her head slightly down, allowing her wig's longer hair to partially obscure her face whenever Winters looked in her direction. After the presentation, the room shifted to a reception format. Servers circulated with champagne and appetizers while recruiters mingled with potential candidates. Jasmine accepted a glass but didn't drink, instead using it as a prop while she navigated the room. She strategically positioned herself near Jenkins and Wilson, pretending to check her phone while eavesdropping on their conversation. "Miami route needs coverage immediately," Jenkins was saying. "The clients are getting impatient." "What about the FBI problem?" Wilson asked quietly. "Handled for now. They're focused on the discrimination angle. The interview that agent gave was all about racial profiling, nothing about our operation." Jasmine suppressed a smile. Their plan was working. Eventually, she maneuvered into a direct conversation with Jenkins, carefully portraying herself as jaded and financially motivated. "So how much leeway do we actually have?" she asked after establishing her cover story. "I've bent plenty of rules before, but I need to know what I'm getting into." Jenkins studied her briefly before responding. "Nothing you haven't already done, I'm sure. Just helping certain passengers avoid the usual hassles. Occasionally delivering packages. The less you know about specifics, the better for everyone. And the money's guaranteed?" "Because I've got bills piling up." "Guaranteed and substantial. Stephanie can explain the financial side better." He gestured toward Winters, who was approaching their conversation circle. Jasmine's heart rate increased, but her expression remained neutral. This was the most dangerous moment, face to face with the woman who had humiliated her on the aircraft. "New recruit?" Winters asked Jenkins, her eyes scanning Jasmine with practiced assessment. "Tasha Williams. 8 years with Delta, recently furloughed." Kyle says she's solid. Winters extended her hand. Stephanie. I handle operations for several routes. Jasmine shook her hand firmly, matching Winters' direct gaze. Nice to meet you. I'm interested in the financial details. I understand payment is offshore. For the next 10 minutes, they discussed the mechanics of the operation in the careful, coded language of criminals. Winters described how special passengers would be identified, how flight attendants would facilitate their movement through airports, and how payment would be structured to avoid detection. We have connections in customs and security at major hubs, Winters explained. Your job is simply to ensure our clients reach these checkpoints at the right time with the right documentation. What about security cameras? Jasmine asked, portraying appropriate caution. Our technical team handles that. Certain areas have convenient blind spots. Winters smiled coldly. Any other concerns? Just one, Jasmine replied. What happened with that FBI agent? I saw the news. Winters' expression darkened. An unfortunate necessity. She was getting too close, asking too many questions. We had to neutralize the threat. And it worked. She's off the case. Completely. Now she's busy playing the discrimination card on national television while our operation continues. Winters laughed dismissively. These people always fall back on racism accusations when caught doing something wrong. The mask had slipped again, revealing the prejudice beneath Winters' professional veneer. Jasmine maintained her cover while inwardly documenting every incriminating statement. As the conversation continued, Jasmine sensed Winters studying her more intently. A flicker of suspicion crossed the flight attendant's face. Have we met before? Something about you seems familiar. Jasmine felt adrenaline surge through her system but kept her expression neutral. I don't think so. I've been based in Atlanta for most of my career. Winters continued staring, her eyes narrowing slightly. Take off your glasses. It was a direct challenge, one that would escalate suspicion if refused. Jasmine complied, removing the non-prescription glasses that were part of her disguise. Winters leaned closer, studying her features. Recognition dawned in her eyes. You're. Before she could finish, Jasmine signaled the tactical team by touching her left earring twice, then dropped all pretense. FBI. You're under arrest, Stephanie. Chaos erupted instantly. The security guards moved toward Jasmine, but the conference room doors burst open as FBI tactical teams flooded in. Federal agents. Everybody down. Winters reacted with unexpected speed, shoving Jasmine hard before bolting toward a service door. Jasmine recovered quickly and pursued, following Winters into the hotel's back corridors. The chase led through the hotel's industrial areas, kitchens where startled staff dropped trays, laundry rooms with mountains of sheets, narrow service hallways designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Winters clearly knew the layout, suggesting previous meetings had been held here. Jasmine maintained pursuit, her FBI training evident in her controlled breathing and tactical movement. She radioed her position to the team. Suspect heading toward South Service elevator. Moving to parking level. In the parking garage, the confrontation reached its climax. Winters, cornered between vehicles with FBI agents approaching from multiple directions, turned to face Jasmine with hatred in her eyes. You think you've won? Winters spat. Our organization reaches further than you can imagine. Politicians, judges, corporate executives, they all use our services. You'll never touch them. We already have, Jasmine replied calmly. Your offshore accounts led us to everything. While you were focused on me, my team was following the money. Winters lunged suddenly, a concealed knife appearing in her hand. Jasmine reacted with trained precision, sidestepping the attack and disarming Winters with a textbook wrist lock. As Winters cried out in pain, Jasmine forced her to the ground and secured her hands with zip ties. Leaning close, Jasmine spoke quietly so only Winters could hear. You chose the wrong person to racially profile. You chose the wrong weapon against the wrong agent. The rage in Winters' eyes gave way to something else, the dawning realization of complete defeat. As tactical team members took custody of Winters, Jasmine stood watching, her disguise now irrelevant, her mission accomplished. Throughout the hotel, similar scenes played out as FBI agents arrested Jenkins, Wilson, and 12 other members of the trafficking network. Evidence was seized, suspects processed, and the first steps taken toward dismantling an operation that had victimized countless young women. Later that night, as Jasmine removed her disguise in a secure FBI facility, Director Hayes visited to personally congratulate her. Preliminary reports confirm we've identified over 40 victims who can now be rescued, he informed her. And the financial evidence leads directly to several prominent individuals who thought themselves untouchable. Jasmine nodded, feeling the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. And Winters? Facing multiple federal charges, human trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. She'll never see freedom again. Hayes paused. The airline is cooperating fully now. They're terrified of the publicity. As they should be, Jasmine replied. They enabled this for years by ignoring complaints about her behavior. As she prepared to leave, Hayes added, the Attorney General specifically asked me to convey his admiration for how you handled this. Turning a personal attack into an operational advantage showed exceptional judgment. Jasmine appreciated the acknowledgement but found her thoughts turning to the victims rather than the praise. Somewhere, young women would be rescued because of tonight's operation. Families would be reunited. Lives would begin the long process of healing. That, more than any commendation, made the ordeal worthwhile. 3 months after the hotel sting operation, Jasmine sat in the witness box of the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta. The courtroom was packed with media representatives, victims' families, and law enforcement officials. Judge Marion Harris presided over what had become one of the most significant human trafficking cases in recent history. Stephanie Winters sat at the defendant's table alongside her 12 co-conspirators. Her once immaculate appearance had deteriorated during pretrial detention, her blonde hair now showing dark roots, her expression hardened by the reality of her situation. Next to her, Kyle Jenkins and Tara Wilson looked equally diminished, the gravity of their crimes and potential sentences weighing visibly upon them. Federal Prosecutor Alicia Montgomery approached the witness stand. Special Agent Powell, please describe for the court how you first became aware of the trafficking operation involving the defendants. For the next hour, Jasmine methodically outlined the investigation, from initial intelligence about flight attendants facilitating trafficking to her undercover work that led to the network's exposure. She detailed the sophisticated operation that had used commercial airlines to transport victims across state and international boundaries. The defendants exploited their positions as flight attendants to move victims through airports, Jasmine explained. They utilized crew credentials to bypass security, created documentation to facilitate illegal transport, and used racial profiling as a tactic to neutralize law enforcement interest. When Winters' defense attorney cross-examined Jasmine, he attempted to portray the racial incident as unrelated to the trafficking charges. Isn't it true, Agent Powell, that your removal from the aircraft was due to a simple misunderstanding about a stolen wallet? Jasmine remained composed. No, sir. Evidence recovered from MS. Winters' electronic communications proves the incident was deliberately orchestrated to remove me from the flight because I had observed suspicious activities related to their trafficking operation. The defense attorney tried another approach. But you have no direct evidence that my client was motivated by racial prejudice rather than legitimate security concerns. We have Ms. Winters' own words from the sting operation, Jasmine replied firmly. And statements from 37 former passengers who filed complaints about discriminatory treatment from Ms. Winters over a 5-year period, complaints that were systematically buried by airline management. Throughout the testimony, Jasmine maintained eye contact with the jury, her credibility strengthening the prosecution's case with each precise, factual answer. In the gallery sat several of the rescued victims, their presence a powerful reminder of the human cost of the defendant's actions. One young woman, 19-year-old Lucy Chen from San Francisco, had been particularly instrumental in the case. Lured with promises of modeling opportunities, she had been transported through 3 different airports before escaping from a Dallas hotel. Her testimony earlier in the trial had moved several jurors to tears. As the trial progressed, evidence mounted against the defendants. Financial records revealed payments totaling millions of dollars flowing through offshore accounts. Electronic communications detailed the movement of packages and merchandise, dehumanizing code for the young women being trafficked. Hotel receipts, flight manifests, and surveillance footage created a comprehensive picture of a criminal enterprise operating in plain sight under the protection of airline credentials. Perhaps most damning was the evidence against airline executives who had facilitated the operation through willful negligence. 3 senior managers had been charged separately after evidence emerged that they had actively suppressed complaints about Winters and created scheduling accommodations that enabled the trafficking routes. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for all defendants. Judge Harris scheduled sentencing for the following month, remanding all defendants to continued custody given the severity of the charges and flight risk. Outside the courthouse, Jasmine addressed the media briefly. Today's verdict represents justice for the victims of this trafficking network. No position of authority, whether as a flight attendant, corporate executive, or public official, shields someone from accountability for participating in human trafficking. In the months following the trial, the impact of the case extended far beyond the criminal convictions. The airline industry implemented comprehensive reforms in response to congressional hearings sparked by the case. New screening procedures for crew members, mandatory reporting of suspicious activities, and enhanced training on implicit bias and human trafficking recognition became standard across all major carriers. The airline at the center of the case faced both civil litigation from victims and regulatory penalties from federal authorities. They ultimately established a $50 million victim compensation fund and implemented extensive internal reforms, including a complete restructuring of their complaint investigation process. At Jasmine's recommendation, the FBI established a specialized unit focused specifically on transportation-based trafficking operations, with increased surveillance at major transportation hubs nationwide. 1 month after the verdict, Jasmine visited her childhood neighborhood in Cleveland. The community center where she'd spent time as a teenager now hosted workshops she had helped develop, teaching young women to recognize trafficking tactics and providing resources for those at risk. As she addressed a room of attentive teenagers, Jasmine shared a carefully edited version of the case, emphasizing the tactics traffickers use to target vulnerable young women. They look for isolation, economic need, and dreams of a better future, she explained. They offer solutions that seem too good to be true, because they are. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. After the workshop, Jasmine met privately with the parents of the 3 girls who had disappeared from her neighborhood years ago, the event that had partly inspired her career path. Though their daughters had never been found, the parents expressed gratitude that Jasmine's work might prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. Back in Washington, Director Hayes called Jasmine to his office with unexpected news. "The Attorney General has approved your proposal," he announced. The Jasmine Powell Initiative for Transportation Safety will receive full funding for the next 5 years. The initiative would place specially trained agents on high-risk routes, create enhanced reporting systems for transportation workers to safely report suspicious activities, and establish victim support services specifically designed for trafficking survivors recovered from transportation networks. "It's not about me," Jasmine insisted. "It's about creating systematic change. Sometimes it takes one person's experience to illuminate a systemic problem," Hayes replied. "Your handling of this case has changed how we approach these investigations." The following week, Jasmine attended the sentencing hearing for Stephanie Winters and her co-conspirators. Judge Harris imposed the maximum sentences allowed. 30 years for Winters as the operation's key facilitator, with similarly substantial sentences for the others. Before delivering the sentence, Judge Harris addressed Winters directly. "Ms. Winters, you exploited your position of authority to participate in the trafficking of vulnerable young women. You used racial prejudice as a tool to deflect scrutiny from your criminal activities. And when confronted by law enforcement, you chose to escalate rather than cooperate." Winters, finally facing the consequences of her actions, spoke briefly before sentencing. For the first time, she acknowledged the racial prejudice that had facilitated her crimes. "I viewed certain people as less valuable, less believable," she admitted. That view made it easier to participate in a system that commodified human beings. As Winters was led away to begin her sentence, Jasmine felt no personal satisfaction. Only the professional recognition that justice had been served and a dangerous trafficking network dismantled. 6 months after the trial concluded, Jasmine received an invitation to speak at a national conference on transportation security. Before her presentation, she visited a rehabilitation center where several trafficking survivors from the case were rebuilding their lives. Lucy Chen, now working as an advocate for trafficking survivors, greeted Jasmine with a hug. "Your foundation scholarship is helping me finish college," she said. "I'm majoring in criminal justice." "Following in my footsteps?" Jasmine asked with a smile. "Someone needs to continue the work," Lucy replied seriously. "What happened to us shouldn't happen to anyone else." As Jasmine left the center, she reflected on the journey from that moment when her badge clattered to the floor of the aircraft to the systematic changes now being implemented nationwide. What had begun as a routine investigation, complicated by one woman's prejudice, had transformed into a movement for accountability and reform. The trafficking network had made a catastrophic error in judgment. They had selected Jasmine for targeting because they believed her race made her vulnerable, an easy target for discrimination. Instead, they had inadvertently chosen an FBI agent whose determination, training, and commitment to justice would ultimately dismantle their entire operation. Justice had been served, not just through criminal convictions, but through the ongoing work to prevent future victims from suffering the same fate. And while Jasmine knew the fight against human trafficking would continue, this case had struck a significant blow against those who believed they could exploit both prejudice and position to profit from human suffering. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination often backfires against those who practice it. Stephanie Winters weaponized racial prejudice against Agent Powell, never suspecting this would lead to her own downfall. The case teaches us that our biases can blind us to reality. Winters saw only what she wanted to see, missing the skilled federal agent behind the racial stereotype. For victims of discrimination, Jasmine's journey offers hope. Rather than allowing the humiliation to defeat her, she transformed it into strategic advantage. She channeled her righteous anger into methodical justice, demonstrating that professional excellence remains the most powerful response to prejudice. The story also highlights how institutions often enable discrimination through inaction. The airline repeatedly buried complaints about Winters, allowing prejudice to fester until it enabled serious crimes. True change requires accountability at all levels. Most importantly, this case shows that fighting discrimination and fighting crime are interconnected battles. The same prejudice that led Winters to profile Jasmine also facilitated her trafficking operation by dehumanizing victims. Justice depends on seeing every person's full humanity. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you have the courage to keep fighting for justice despite facing such blatant discrimination? If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of injustice. Comment below with your thoughts on how racial bias continues to impact law enforcement and travel safety today. Thanks for listening to this incredible true story, and remember, sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. See you in the next video.